A poor widow and her daughter saved a dying alpha vampire in the frozen river. What he did next will change their lives. For Chapter 1, the frozen reverse winter wind cut through Eleanor's threadbare cloak like a knife through parchment. She clutched her daughter's hand tighter, their boots crunching through fresh snow as they hurried along the frozen riverbank. The sun had already dipped below the skeletal trees, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and ash. "Mama, I'm cold," whispered Iris, her 7-year-old voice trembling. "I know, my love." Just a bit further, Eleanor's breath misted in the air. They were late, returning from the market later than she'd ever allowed. The village elders had warned against traveling after dark, especially near the old stone bridge where the river curved deep into the forest. But the baker had kept them waiting for day-old bread, their only purchase. After selling her last good shawl, Eleanor's husband had been dead 3 months. The fever took him before the first snow, leaving her with debts she couldn't pay and a daughter who still asked when Papa would come home. The cottage they rented sat on the far edge of town, isolated and cheap. Some nights, Eleanor wondered if isolation was a mercy or a curse. The sound reached them first, a low, broken groan that seemed to rise from the river itself. Iris froze. "Mama?" Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to run, to pull her daughter away from whatever made that sound. But something else stirred beneath her fear, curiosity, perhaps, or the bone-deep understanding of what suffering sounded like. "Stay behind me," she whispered. They crept toward the riverbank, where ice had begun to form in jagged sheets along the edges. The water ran black in the dying light, and there, half submerged between broken ice and stone, lay a man. No, not a man. Even from 10 feet away, Eleanor could see he was too pale to still. His dark coat had frozen to his body, and his hair black as raven feathers spread across the ice like spilled ink. Blood stained the snow around him, far too much blood for anyone to survive. "He's dead," Iris whispered. But then his chest moved, barely. A shallow rise and fall. That might have been imagination if Eleanor hadn't been watching so closely. "Go back to the path," Eleanor said firmly. "Wait for me there, Mama." "No, no, Iris." Her daughter obeyed, reluctant steps crunching away through snow. Eleanor approached the figure slowly, every nerve alive with warning. This close, she could see the unnatural perfection of his features, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that even unconscious held a cruel elegance. His skin wasn't just pale. It was luminous, like moonlight given flesh. The stories her grandmother had whispered came flooding back. The old families, the night courts, the immortals who ruled from shadowed halls and made laws that even kings dared not break. Vampire. Eleanor should have run. Should have grabbed Iris and fled back to the village, barred the door, pretended she'd seen nothing. Instead, she knelt in the snow beside him. His eyes opened. They were silver. Not gray, not blue, true silver, like polished mirrors reflecting a winter sky. They fixed on her with an intensity that stopped her breath, and for a moment neither of them moved. "Don't," he whispered, his voice rough as gravel. "Don't touch me." But even as he spoke, she saw the wound, a massive gash across his chest where something had torn through coat and flesh alike. The edges looked burned, as though whatever weapon had struck him had been meant to destroy utterly. "You're dying," Eleanor said quietly. Yes, no denial, no plea, just acknowledgement. "What happened?" A bitter smile touched his lips. "Betrayal. The oldest story." His eyes began to close again. "Leave me. If they find you here." "Who?" But he didn't answer. His breathing had become so shallow she could barely see it anymore. Eleanor looked back toward the path where Iris waited, a small silhouette against the darkening trees. She thought of their empty cottage, the unpaid rent, the Baron's men who would come eventually to take even that small shelter away. She thought of her daughter's hollow cheeks, her own raw hands, the endless, grinding poverty that had become their inheritance. She thought of mercy, and what it cost to offer it. "Iris," she called. "Come help me." Her daughter ran back, eyes wide. "Mama, what are you? We're taking him home. But he's dying, yes. And we're not going to let him do it alone in the snow." Eleanor met her daughter's frightened gaze. "Whatever he is, he's suffering. Do you understand?" Iris swallowed hard, then nodded. Together, they managed to drag him from the ice. He was heavier than he looked, solid as stone, and twice Eleanor nearly lost her grip. But eventually they got him onto the snowy bank, and then agonizingly slowly they began the journey home. He didn't wake again, didn't speak, but as they struggled through the darkness, with his weight between them, Eleanor felt his silver eyes open once briefly, to look at her in that glance. She saw recognition of a debt that would bind them in that glance. She saw the beginning of something that would break every rule she'd ever known. The cottage door closed behind them with a sound like a coffin lid falling shut. And Eleanor knew with the certainty that lives in a widow's bones that nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 2. The stranger in the shadows. The cottage had never felt smaller. Eleanor and Iris dragged the vampire across the threshold and into the single room that served as kitchen, parlor, and Eleanor's sleeping space. Iris's tiny alcove lay behind a curtain in the corner. There was nowhere else to put him except Eleanor's own narrow bed. "Get the fire going," Eleanor said, her voice steadier than her hands. "Hot water. All of it." Iris rushed to obey, her small fingers fumbling with kindling. Eleanor turned her attention to the creature bleeding onto her threadbare quilt. His coat was frozen solid, and when she tried to remove it, the fabric cracked like ice. She worked quickly, methodically, the way she'd tended her husband in his final days. But this was different. Her husband had been human, fragile, burning with mortal fever. This being felt carved from marble, cold and impossibly dense. Even unconscious, power radiated from him like heat from banked coals. The wound across his chest made her stomach turn. Something had ripped through him with savage precision, leaving charred flesh and exposed bone. No human survived injuries like this. Perhaps no vampire did either. "What do we do?" Iris whispered, clutching a pot of heating water. "Clean it first. Then," Eleanor paused. She had no medicine for this. No knowledge of vampire anatomy or what kept them alive or undead, or whatever state existed between death and immortality. But she had survived 3 months of widowhood by making choices. Even when every option felt impossible, she cleaned the wound with careful hands, dabbing away frozen blood and debris. He didn't wake, didn't flinch. His skin remained deathly cold beneath her touch. And his breathing, when she could detect it at all, came in intervals so long she kept checking to see if he'd finally stopped. "Mama, look." Iris pointed to his hands. Long fingers, elegant and pale, but the nails were dark, not painted, but naturally black as obsidian. And there, along his wrist where Eleanor had pushed back his sleeve, ran markings. Not scars, but symbols etched in silver that seemed to shimmer even in the firelight. House marks, Eleanor realized with a chill. She'd heard of them in her grandmother's stories. Each vampire family bore their crest in their very flesh, a brand that declared bloodline and allegiance. These marks were elaborate, ancient-looking. Whoever he was, he came from old power. "Will he die?" Iris asked softly. "I don't know." They sat in silence, watching him. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled against the shutters. Eleanor had barred the door, a useless gesture probably, against whatever might come hunting for him. But it gave her something to do with her shaking hands. Around midnight, he stirred. Eleanor jerked upright from her chair, pulse hammering. His eyes remained closed, but his lips moved, forming words in a language she didn't recognize. It sounded old, full of sharp consonants and rolling vowels that seemed to carry weight beyond mere sound. Then he spoke in her language, still unconscious, voice rough with pain. "The oath is broken. House Corvin has fallen. All of them gone." Eleanor leaned closer. "Who did this to you?" "Betrayed," he whispered. "My own blood. Matthias. He wanted the seat, couldn't wait for succession. So he struck during daylight when I was weakest." Daylight. Eleanor's grandmother had spoken of that vulnerability, how the ancient ones grew sluggish when the sun rose, their power dimmed to embers. A perfect time for assassination. House Corvin, Eleanor repeated softly. She'd never heard the name, but something in the way he spoke. It suggested tragedy on a scale she couldn't imagine. His hand suddenly shot out, catching her wrist with crushing strength. His eyes snapped open, silver and wild and unseeing. "Don't trust them. Don't trust any of the houses. They'll destroy you for helping me." "I'm nobody," Eleanor said, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. "I'm just a widow. They won't care about me." His grip loosened slightly, and his eyes seemed to focus on her face. "Really see her for the first time. You saved me. I found you dying. What else should I have done? Left me." His voice held absolute certainty. "That's what anyone sensible would do. That's what any human who valued their life would do." Eleanor gently extracted her wrist from his grasp. "Well, I've never been accused of being sensible." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps. or the ghost of amusement. Then pain crashed over him like a wave, and he gasped, his body going rigid. The wound, Eleanor said. It's not healing. Why isn't it healing? Silver. He ground out between clenched teeth. The blade was consecrated silver. It burns, prevents regeneration. How do I help you? His eyes met hers, and in them she saw something unexpected, genuine confusion, as though the question itself was foreign. You can't, unless, he trailed off, jaw tightening. Unless what? Blood. The word came out hoarse. Fresh blood helps accelerate healing, even through silver poisoning. But I can't ask how much. He stared at her. You don't understand what you're offering. How much blood do you need to survive? A long silence stretched between them. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, and Iris made a small sound from her alcove behind the curtain. Not much, he finally said. A mouthful. Maybe two. But the act itself creates complications, a bond. Temporary, but real. You would feel what I feel. Know things about me. And I about you. Eleanor considered this. Every instinct warned her to refuse, to maintain distance from this dangerous creature who'd brought violence to her doorstep. But she looked at the wound still seeping across his chest, at the way pain tightened his inhuman features, and she made her choice. Do it, she said. Eleanor, she froze. How do you know my name? You spoke it. To your daughter. I remember. He closed his eyes briefly. I remember everything from the river. Your kindness. Your daughter's fear. The way you looked at me and chose mercy over sense. Then you know I've already decided. She rolled up her sleeve, exposing her wrist. Take what you need. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for her, and Eleanor understood. He was terrified. Not of dying, but of this, of accepting help, of owing debt, of whatever bond her blood would create between them. I am Lord Damien Corvin, he whispered, as though the name were both confession and warning. And I swear on my house and my honor, what remains of it, I will protect you from what comes next. Then his lips touched her wrist, and the world turned silver. Chapter 3. The taste of silver. The moment Damien's lips touched her wrist, Eleanor's world fractured. She'd expected pain, a sharp bite, tearing flesh, the hot rush of blood leaving her body. Instead, she felt coolness, precise as a surgeon's blade, and then a pull. Not physical, but deeper, as though he were drawing something essential from her marrow, from the very core of what made her Eleanor. Images flooded her mind, vivid and disorienting, a great hall lit by 1,000 candles. Stone walls hung with tapestries depicting battles fought before nations had names. Faces pale, beautiful, cruel, turning toward her with expressions of contempt and hunger. And over it all, a throne carved from black obsidian, empty and waiting, his memories. His life bleeding into hers through the connection of blood. She saw him younger, or whatever passed for youth and an immortal. Saw him kneeling before an ancient woman, whose silver hair fell like water down her back, her eyes the same mercurial shade as his. His mother, Eleanor, understood somehow. The previous Lady Corvin. You will lead our house with wisdom, not cruelty, the woman said. Power without mercy is merely tyranny. Remember that, my son. Then the memory shifted, darkened. She saw Damien standing in a doorway at dawn, his body already sluggish with the sun's rising. Saw another vampire behind him, younger, with Damien's same sharp features but eyes like chips of ice. Matthias? Forgive me, brother, Matthias whispered. But some of us are tired of waiting for power. The blade, gleaming with silver light, plunging into Damien's chest. The fall from the balcony into the frozen river far below. The absolute certainty that he would die there. Alone, betrayed by his own blood. Eleanor gasped as the visions released her. She found herself still in her cottage, still seated beside the bed, but Damien had pulled away from her wrist. 2 small marks remained, already closing, barely more than pinpricks. He stared at her with something like horror. You saw, he said flatly. I saw. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Her head spun, and she gripped the edge of the bed to keep from swaying. Your brother. He tried to kill you. Succeeded. Nearly. Damien's hand moved to his chest, where the wound had already begun to knit together, flesh, regenerating with visible speed. The silver poison still slowed the process, but Eleanor's blood had given him enough strength to start healing. Why? Eleanor asked. What did he gain? Everything. Bitterness crept into Damien's voice. Our house, our seat on the Night Court, control of Corvin territories that span 3 countries. All he needed was my death, and the succession laws would favor him as the only surviving heir. But you're not dead. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, thanks to a widow and her daughter who should have known better. Eleanor stood carefully, testing her balance. The blood loss wasn't severe, but the psychic impact of the connection left her feeling hollowed out. I need air. She moved to the window, pushing open the shutter despite the cold. Night air rushed in, sharp and clean. Behind her, she heard Damien sit up, heard the rustle of fabric as he moved. You should rest, he said. The bond, it takes energy. You'll feel weak for a day or two. I've felt weak for 3 months. Eleanor didn't turn around. One more day won't kill me. Silence stretched between them. Then, I saw your memories too. Her hands tightened on the windowsill. I know, of course he had. The bond worked both ways. He'd seen her husband's death, the creditors at her door, the night she'd sold her wedding ring for bread. He'd seen her shame, her fear, her desperate love for the daughter sleeping behind the curtain. He'd seen everything that made her vulnerable. Your husband, Damien said quietly. Thomas, he was kind to you. Eleanor's throat tightened. Yes, and you loved him. Yes, I'm sorry. The simple words, spoken with genuine feeling, nearly broke her. She blinked hard against sudden tears. Why? You didn't kill him. No, but I understand grief. A pause. I understand what it means to lose everyone you were supposed to protect. Eleanor turned to face him. He'd managed to sit fully upright, his back against the wall, the blanket pulled around his waist. His chest was still bare, the wound now reduced to angry red lines, spider webbing across pale skin. He looked less like a corpse and more like what he truly was, something ancient and powerful, temporarily diminished but not defeated. Your house, Eleanor said. Corvin, you said it fell. Are there others? Other survivors? His expression shuddered. No, Matthias was thorough. He struck at dawn when we were weakest, and he brought allies, vampires from House Volkov, our historical rivals. They killed everyone. Servants, guards, even the children. His voice went flat, emotionless. There are laws against such slaughter. The Night Court is supposed to prevent exactly this kind of bloodshed. But if Matthias has allied with Volkov, then the court itself may be compromised, which means that when they discover I survived, they'll come for me, and for anyone who helped me. His silver eyes fixed on her. You need to leave, Eleanor. Take Iris and go. Tonight, as far from here as you can manage. Where would I go? I have no money, no family. This cottage is all we have. Then I've condemned you. He looked away, jaw tight. I should have died in that river. Eleanor crossed back to the bed, sat down on the edge. You're not dead. Neither am I. Neither is Iris. Those are facts. Everything else, we figure out as it comes. You don't understand what you're facing. Then explain it to me. He studied her for a long moment, as though trying to understand how this mortal woman could sit so calmly beside a creature who could kill her with one hand. Finally, he spoke. The vampire world runs on laws older than your civilization. Blood laws, house laws, territory laws. I was the Lord of House Corvin, which gave me certain protections and certain responsibilities. Now I'm nothing, a dead man walking. And you? He gestured at the marks on her wrist. You've given me blood freely, which creates a bond recognized by our laws. You're not exactly under my protection, but you're not entirely outside it either. You exist in a gray space, and gray spaces are dangerous. What does the bond mean? Exactly? It means I'll feel if you're in mortal danger. You'll feel echoes of my emotions. It fades in a few days unless renewed. He paused. It means I owe you a life debt. I don't want, it doesn't matter what you want. The debt exists. His voice softened slightly. Thank you. For the blood. For your life. For not running when you should have. Outside, something moved in the darkness. They both heard it, the soft crunch of snow, too deliberate to be wind. Damien's entire body went rigid, his head tilting slightly as he listened with senses far keener than human. They're here, he whispered. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Already? Matthias wouldn't wait. He'll have sent hunters the moment he realized my body wasn't in the river. Damien tried to stand, nearly collapsed. I'm still too weak. I can't fight them. Not yet. The footsteps came closer. Multiple sets. Circling the cottage, Eleanor stood, heart hammering. Then we run. Where? I know these woods. There's an old cellar. A root cellar from before the village was built. It's hidden. Can you find it in the dark? I can try. A knock sounded at the door. Polite, civilized, utterly terrifying in its courtesy. A male voice called out, smooth as poisoned honey, "Lord Corvin, we know you're in there. Come out, and the humans need not suffer." Damien's eyes met Eleanor's, and in them she saw desperate calculation. "Wake your daughter," he whispered. We run. Chapter 4. Into the shadows Eleanor moved on instinct, years of motherhood overriding terror. She slipped behind the curtain and shook Iris awake, pressing a hand over her daughter's mouth before she could cry out. "We have to go," Eleanor whispered. "Right now. No questions. Stay silent." Iris's eyes went wide, but she nodded. "Good girl." Eleanor grabbed their thickest blanket, wrapped it around her daughter's shoulders, then turned back to Damien. He'd managed to stand, though he swayed like a tree in a storm. His shirt hung in tatters, and he'd pulled on what remained of his coat. In the firelight, he looked like something from a nightmare, too pale, too sharp, inhuman in ways that the darkness emphasized rather than hid. Another knock, harder this time. "Lord Corvin, we're losing patience. Open the door, or we open it for you." "The back window," Eleanor breathed. "It's small, but we can manage." Damien nodded, moving with her toward the rear of the cottage. Every step seemed to cost him, but he didn't complain. Eleanor unlatched the window, barely more than a gap in the wall, designed for ventilation, and pushed it open. Cold air and snow rushed in. "Iris first," Damien said quietly. Eleanor lifted her daughter, threading her through the narrow opening. Iris dropped into the snow outside with barely a sound. Eleanor went next, squeezing through with difficulty, her skirts catching on rough wood. The front door exploded inward. Eleanor heard it from outside, the crash of splintering wood, the sound of boots on her floor. Male voices, multiple speakers, calling out in that strange old language Damien had spoken in his delirium. Then Damien came through the window, moving with sudden, fluid grace despite his injuries. He landed in the snow beside Eleanor, and immediately pulled them both against the cottage wall, into the shadows beneath the eaves. "How many?" Eleanor whispered. "3, maybe 4. His voice was barely audible. "Volk of hunters. I can smell their house mark." Inside, furniture crashed. They were searching, tearing through her meager possessions. Eleanor thought of the few things she owned that mattered: Thomas's pipe, Iris's rag doll, the tin box where she kept their marriage certificate, and felt a surge of helpless rage. "The forest," she breathed. "Follow me. Step where I step." She took Iris's hand and began to move, staying low, using every bit of cover the darkness offered. Snow muffled their footsteps. The wind worked in their favor, blowing from the cottage toward the trees, carrying sound away from the hunters. Damien followed. Silent as death itself, they reached the tree line just as a voice called out behind them. "The window. They've run." "Don't stop," Damien said urgently. "Keep moving." Eleanor plunged into the forest, pulling Iris with her. Branches caught at their clothes. Snow deepened, making each step a struggle. Behind them, she heard the hunters emerging from the cottage, heard their voices raised in coordination. "This way," Eleanor gasped, veering left toward a small ravine she knew from berry-picking trips. The land dropped away sharply, and she half slid, half fell down the slope. Iris clutched tight against her. Damien descended with inhuman balance, barely disturbing the snow-dotted to the bottom. Eleanor paused, orienting herself. The old root cellar was northeast, near where the river curved back toward the village. Maybe half a mile. In summer, an easy walk. In winter darkness, with hunters behind them, and a child struggling through snow up to her knees. "I can carry her," Damien said, reading her hesitation. "You can barely stand. I'm stronger than I look." "And faster." He knelt before Iris. "May I?" Iris looked to Eleanor, who nodded. Damien lifted the girl easily, settling her against his chest. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and Eleanor saw her daughter's fear war with something else, a child's instinctive trust in someone who promised protection. They moved faster now. Damien navigated the forest with preternatural grace, avoiding obstacles Eleanor could barely see. His night vision, she realized, another advantage of what he was. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The hunters weren't bothering with stealth anymore. "They're tracking us," Damien said grimly. "Blood scent. They can follow my trail." "How do we lose them?" "We don't. We hide and hope they pass us by, or we reach shelter before they catch up." Eleanor pushed harder, lungs burning with cold air. Her feet were numb inside her boots. Beside her, Damien's breathing remained even steady, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way he held himself too carefully. The wound might be healing, but he was far from recovered. A howl split the night, not a wolf, but something that mimicked one. The sound raised every hair on Eleanor's neck. What was that? Hunting call. Damien's voice was tight. They're coordinating, trying to flush us toward each other. The cellar's close. Just past the old oak there. Eleanor pointed to a massive tree, its branches bare and skeletal against the sky. Beyond it, barely visible in the snow, lay a depression in the ground covered by rotting boards. They ran. Eleanor reached the cellar first, dropping to her knees to clear snow from the entrance. The boards were half frozen, sealed by ice and time. She pried at them desperately, her fingers too cold to feel pain when splinters drove into her flesh. Damien set Iris down and added his strength to hers. The boards came away with a shriek of protesting wood, revealing steps leading down into absolute darkness. Inside, he ordered. Eleanor didn't argue. She guided Iris down the steps, feeling her way in the pitch black. The cellar smelled of earth and decay, and something scurried away from her feet. She pressed back against the stone wall, pulling Iris close. Damien descended last, dragging the boards back into place above them. Darkness became complete. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, faint, but growing closer, Eleanor heard footsteps above. Multiple sets, moving through the snow. The hunters had reached the old oak. Spread out, a voice called. He's bleeding. He can't have gone far. Silence. The footsteps moved in different directions, searching in the darkness of the cellar. Eleanor felt Iris trembling against her. She wrapped both arms around her daughter, willing her own heart to quiet. Beside her, Damien stood utterly still, so still she might have thought him a statue except for the faint brush of his shoulder against hers. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, one of the hunters spoke again, closer now, right above them. Nothing here, just old ruins. Check them anyway. Eleanor's breath caught. Beside her, she felt Damien tense, footsteps on the boards directly overhead. Testing weight. One of the hunters was standing on the cellar entrance. It's sealed tight. The hunter called. Hasn't been opened in years. A pause. Then, move on. They must have circled back toward the river. The footsteps retreated. Eleanor counted to 100 before she allowed herself to breathe normally. Beside her, Damien exhaled a sound like wind through dead leaves. They'll be back, he said quietly. Once they realize they've lost the trail. This is temporary safety at best. How long do we have? An hour. Maybe 2. Iris made a small sound, and Eleanor held her tighter. It's all right, sweetheart. We're safe for now, but in the darkness, pressed against cold stone in a cellar that smelled of graves, Eleanor wondered if safety was something they'd ever feel again. What happens at dawn? She asked Damien. A long silence. Then, I sleep. I can't help it. When the sun rises, I'll be vulnerable, unconscious, defenseless. Then we stay hidden until nightfall tomorrow. Eleanor, you don't understand. They'll search every inch of this forest. They'll find us, then we make sure they don't. Eleanor's voice was steady, decided. You saved us by getting us here. Now let me save you. I know these woods. I know places even the village children haven't found. We'll move before dawn, while you still have your strength. In the darkness, she felt rather than saw him turn toward her. Why are you doing this? He asked softly. You owe me nothing. You could slip away right now, take Iris, disappear. They're not hunting you. Eleanor thought about that. About the easy answer, self-preservation, fear, the hope of reward. About the true answer, harder to voice, because no one should die alone in the dark, she finally said. And because when I looked at you in that river, I saw someone who'd given up hope. I won't let you give up now. A sound escaped him, almost a laugh, rough with surprise. You're either very brave or very foolish. I'm a widow with a child to protect, and nothing left to lose. That makes me dangerous. This time he did laugh, quiet and genuine. Yes, I'm beginning to see that. Above them, snow continued to fall, covering their tracks, buying them time they desperately needed, and in the darkness of the cellar, 3 fugitives to human, 1 immortal waited for dawn. Chapter 5. The hours before dawn's cellar was a tomb of earth and stone. Eleanor sat with her back against the wall, Iris curled in her lap, finally sleeping despite the cold. She could hear the child's breathing, steady and soft, and it anchored her when everything else felt like it was dissolving into nightmare. Damien remained standing near the entrance, listening. Even in complete darkness, Eleanor could sense his alertness, the coiled tension of a predator forced into hiding. How much longer until dawn? She whispered. 3 hours. Maybe 4. His voice came from the darkness, disembodied. I can feel it coming. Like a weight pressing down on my bones. Does it hurt? No, it's more like inevitability. The sun rises, and I fall. No choice, no resistance. Just sleep. A pause. I hate it. Eleanor adjusted Iris's weight carefully. Because you're vulnerable. Because I'm useless. Bitterness crept into his tone. 300 years old, and I'm still at the mercy of daylight, like every other vampire who ever lived. My mother used to say it was the God's way of keeping us humble. A reminder that we're not truly immortal, just long-lived parasites borrowing time. Your mother sounds wise. She was. Silence stretched between them. Then, she would have liked you. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks, grateful for the darkness. She would have thought me foolish for sheltering her son, probably. But she valued courage over sense. Said the sensible people rarely changed anything. Damien moved slightly, and Eleanor heard him settle against the opposite wall. Tell me about your husband, Thomas. The request surprised her. Why? Because we have hours to wait, and silence makes them longer. And because, he hesitated. Because I saw fragments of him in your memories. But I want to hear it from you. Who he was. What he meant. Eleanor stroked Iris's hair, gathering her thoughts. He was a carpenter. A good one. He built our bed, the table in the cottage, everything we owned. He made with his own hands. He was patient, gentle. He sang while he worked. Her voice softened. Terrible voice, off-key and loud, but it made me smile every time. How did you meet? At the village market. I was buying bread, and he was selling a rocking chair he'd carved. I told him it was beautiful, and he offered to build me one as a wedding gift. She smiled at the memory. I thought he was joking. We weren't even courting. But you married him, 6 months later. He built me the chair first though. Said he wanted to prove he was serious. Eleanor's throat tightened. Iris was born a year after. He made her a cradle that rocked so smoothly, she'd fall asleep in minutes. He said every child deserved to feel safe. He sounds like a good man. He was. The best I've known. She paused. When the fever came, he fought it for 3 weeks. Kept saying he had to finish a cabinet for the magistrate, had to provide for us. Even when he could barely lift his head, he tried to work. Tears pricked her eyes. I held his hand at the end. He told me he was sorry. Sorry for leaving us. As if dying was somehow his choice. In the darkness, she heard Damien shift. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That you lost him. That you're alone. I'm not alone. I have Iris. And now me. For better or worse. Eleanor considered that. Tell me about your brother, Matthias. What was he like before the betrayal? Damien exhaled slowly. Charming, brilliant, ruthless. But I thought it was ambition, not cruelty. He was a century younger than me, practically a child by vampire standards. Our mother died when he was barely 50, and I raised him. Regret colored his words. I should have seen it. The resentment. The way he looked at the throne. But he was my brother. I trusted him. Family blinds us. Yes. The single word carried depths of pain. He used to ask me about succession laws. How they worked. What happened if the Lord died without direct heirs? I thought he was curious, preparing for his own future. I never imagined. He stopped. I never imagined he'd strike at dawn, when I couldn't defend myself. That he'd bring Volkov assassins into our house and slaughter everyone I'd sworn to protect. The children, Eleanor said softly, remembering the fragment she'd seen in his memories. You mentioned children. House wards. Young vampires placed under our protection while they learned control, politics, the laws. 12 of them, ranging from 20 to 80 years old. Matthias killed them all. His voice went flat, emotionless in the way of someone barely holding back rage. He killed them in their day sleep, when they couldn't even open their eyes to see death coming. No trial, no mercy, no honor. That's why you have to survive, Eleanor said, to bring him to justice. A bitter laugh. Justice. What a mortal concept. The Night Court doesn't care about justice. They care about order, stability, power. If Matthias has allied with House Volkov, one of the 5 great houses, then he has protection. The court won't touch him. then you make them care. How? Eleanor shifted Iris carefully, freeing one hand. You said vampire society runs on laws, blood laws, house laws. Use them, find allies. Expose what he did. I have no allies. House Corvin is destroyed. You have me. Silence fell, thick and charged. Then Damien spoke, his voice strange. Eleanor, you're human. You have no power, no standing in our world. What could you possibly? I saved your life. That has to count for something. A blood debt, yes. But then use it. Use me. Whatever you need to survive, to rebuild, to fight back, I'll help you. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly what I'm offering. I'm offering alliance, partnership, whatever word your laws recognize. Eleanor's voice steadied with conviction. You need someone Matthias won't expect. Someone who can move in daylight, who can go places you can't. I need protection for my daughter and myself. We help each other. It's not that simple. It never is. But it's better than dying in a cellar. She heard him move, heard the soft sound of fabric as he shifted position. When he spoke again, his voice was closer. He'd crossed the cellar in absolute silence. You're serious? Completely. This could get you killed. Both of you. The moment Matthias discovers you exist, he'll send hunters. Not just to kill me, but to eliminate anyone connected to me. They're already hunting us. At least this way, we're fighting back. A long pause. Then Damien's hand found hers in the darkness, cool fingers wrapping around her warmer ones. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. If we do this, he said slowly, if we form this alliance, there are rules, laws I'll have to teach you. Ways to move through vampire society without getting yourself killed. And Iris. He paused. She'll need protection, wards, safeguards. Children are valuable in our world and not in ways you'd want. Eleanor's grip tightened. Explain. Later, when we're safe. But know this, if you truly want to help me, I'll need your blood again, regularly, to heal, to maintain strength. The bond will deepen. You'll feel more of what I feel, see more of what I see. It's invasive, uncomfortable, and irreversible after a certain point. What point? The third feeding. After that, the bond becomes permanent. You'd be bound to me for life, able to sense my location, my emotional state, my injuries. And I'd sense yours. Eleanor absorbed this. A permanent connection to a vampire. To this vampire, dangerous and damaged and desperate. Every practical instinct screamed refusal, but she thought of Iris sleeping in her arms, of their cottage torn apart by hunters, of the long months since Thomas's death, scraping by on nothing, slowly drowning in poverty and grief. She thought of Damien's memories, the great hall, the throne, the power that had been his before betrayal stole it away. If she helped him reclaim what he'd lost, perhaps he could give them what they needed. Safety, security, a future beyond endless winter. 3 feedings for a permanent bond, she said. And after that, you're mine. Not as property, he added quickly, as, I don't even know what to call it, companion, ally, someone whose life is tied to mine. He paused. It's not romantic, Eleanor. It's not gentle. It's practical and binding and forever. Nothing is forever. You said yourself even vampires die. Fair point. She heard the ghost of amusement in his voice. So, what do you say? Do we make this formal? Eleanor looked down at Iris's sleeping face, barely visible in the darkness. She thought of Thomas, of his patient hands and terrible singing, of his last words, take care of her. She was taking care of her daughter, in the only way left available. Yes, Eleanor said, we form an alliance. You get your revenge, and I get protection for Iris and myself. Partners until your house is restored or we're both dead. Whichever comes first. Damien's fingers tightened around hers. Spoken like someone sealing a business contract, isn't it? I suppose it is. He drew her hand up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his lips to her knuckles. Not a bite, just acknowledgement. A gesture that might have been courtly once, before his world fell apart. Partners then, he said softly. May the gods have mercy on us both. Above them, through the board sealing the cellar, Eleanor heard the first bird begin to sing. Dawn was coming, and with it, the real danger would begin. Chapter 6. The day sleep. Damien felt the sun rising like a physical weight settling over his chest. It's starting, he said, his voice already growing distant. Eleanor, listen carefully. I don't have much time. She shifted beside him in the darkness, alert despite hours without sleep. I'm listening. When I fall, I'll be completely unconscious. Not sleeping, absent. You could scream in my ear, set me on fire, cut off my hand, and I wouldn't wake until sunset. His words came faster, urgent. If the hunters find us during the day, you have to leave me. Take Iris and run. Promise me. I won't. Promise me. Steel entered his voice. If they find me in day sleep, I'm dead regardless. But you and Iris still have a chance. Don't waste it on a corpse. Eleanor's silence stretched long enough that Damien wondered if she'd refuse. Then, I promise. If they find us, I'll run. Good. He leaned his head back against the stone wall. The pull was growing stronger, his thoughts beginning to fragment. There's something else. The bond, you'll still feel it even when I'm unconscious. If I'm hurt, you'll know. If I die, you'll feel it like a blade to the chest. Pleasant thought. Despite everything, he almost smiled. I'm trying to prepare you. The bond is. It's not subtle. When the day sleep takes me, you'll feel it. Like I've disappeared from the world. Don't panic. I'll try not to. The first ray of sunlight must have broken the horizon, because suddenly Damien's vision began to dim. Not darkness, something else. A pulling away from consciousness, from the physical world. His body grew heavy, impossibly dense. Damien? Eleanor's voice seemed to come from very far away. Still here. Barely. He forced his eyes to stay open. Eleanor, when I wake tonight, we move. No more hiding. We find allies. Gather resources. I'll teach you everything you need to know to survive in my world. Rest now. We'll talk when you wake. One more thing. The words slurred slightly. If I seem different when I wake, colder, more dangerous, it's not personal. Day sleep strips away the civilized layers. I'll be more vampire than man for the first few hours. Don't be afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Then the sun fully rose, and Damien fell into darkness. Eleanor felt the exact moment he left consciousness, the bond they'd formed through. Blood flared once, a bright silver presence in her mind, then vanished as though someone had snuffed a candle. The absence was so complete, so absolute, that for a terrifying moment she thought he'd died. She reached out in the darkness, finding his shoulder. He still breathed, shallow but steady. His skin had gone even colder than before, like touching marble left in winter. Not dead, just gone. Iris stirred in Eleanor's lap. Mama? Shh, sweetheart, rest. Is he? He's sleeping. We're safe. The lie came easily. Practice from months of telling her daughter everything would be all right, when it manifestly wouldn't. Iris settled back against her, but didn't return to sleep. Eleanor felt her daughter's awareness, her fear held just barely in check. Mama, what happens now? Eleanor stroked Iris's hair, thinking, now we wait. When night comes, we'll move. Go somewhere safer. With him? Yes, with him. Is he truly a vampire? Eleanor hesitated, then chose honesty. Iris deserved that much. Yes. Will he hurt us? No, he's promised to protect us. Why would a vampire protect humans? Smart child. Too smart sometimes. Because I helped him when he needed it. Because we made an agreement. And because, Eleanor paused, searching for words. Because I think he's tired of everyone he cares about dying. Iris absorbed this in silence. Then, Papa died. Yes. And now we're hiding in a cellar with a vampire while hunters search for us. Yes. Mama, I don't understand any of this. Eleanor pulled her daughter closer. Neither do I, love. Neither do I. Hours passed in the darkness. Eleanor dozed intermittently, jolting awake at every sound, real or imagined. Beside her, Damien remained utterly still, not even shifting in his unnatural sleep. Around midday, she guessed by the quality of light filtering through cracks in the boards. Eleanor heard voices above. She froze. Hand clamped over Iris's mouth before her daughter could make a sound. Checked here last night. A man's voice, unfamiliar. Nothing. Check again. Volkov's orders. Every structure, every hole, every goddamn rabbit burrow within 5 miles. Another voice, harder. He wants Corvin's head before the night court convenes. What's the rush? He's wounded, alone, probably dead in a ditch somewhere. Matthias doesn't pay us to speculate. He pays us to hunt. So we hunt. Footsteps moved across the boards above them. Eleanor held her breath, felt Iris doing the same. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain they'd hear it. One of the hunters stopped directly overhead. The cellar. It's sealed, right? We checked it last night. Old. Hasn't been opened in decades. Check it again. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Beside her, Damien remained oblivious, lost in day sleep. She reached for him anyway, gripping his arm as though she could somehow wake him through while alone. She felt nothing through the bond. Just that terrible absence. Footsteps descended the boards, testing them. Then horrifyingly she heard someone trying to pry them up. Wood groaned. One board shifted slightly, letting in a shaft of thin daylight. Eleanor pressed back against the wall, pulling Iris with her. If they opened the cellar, if they saw them, the board lifted further. Another inch and they'd be visible. Then a different voice called out from a distance. Found tracks. Northeast. Toward the old mill. The hunter above them paused. Fresh? Can't tell. But they're boot prints. Human-sized. 2 sets. One small. A moment of consideration. Then the board dropped back into place with a thud. Let's move. If he's got humans helping him, they'll lead us right to him. The footsteps retreated. Eleanor counted to 100, then 200. Before she allowed herself to breathe normally, Iris was shaking. Eleanor held her close, murmuring reassurances. She didn't believe. They'd been seconds from discovery, seconds from death, and Damien had slept through it all helpless as a child. The afternoon crept past with agonizing slowness. Eleanor's legs cramped from sitting in one position. Her stomach growled with hunger they hadn't eaten since yesterday's meager breakfast. Iris whimpered softly, and Eleanor gave her the last piece of bread from her pocket, saved from their market trip that felt like a lifetime ago. The bread was frozen, hard as stone. Iris gnawed at it anyway. Eleanor watched Damien's still form, barely visible in the dim light filtering through the boards. He looked dead, more dead than when they'd pulled him from the river. No rise and fall of breath, no movement, nothing to indicate life. Yet through the bond, she knew he lived. Somewhere, in that absence, he existed. Waiting for sunset to pull him back, she thought about what he'd said, that he'd be different when he woke. More vampire than man. Dangerous. She thought about her promise to run if they were discovered. She thought about the alliance they'd formed in darkness, sealed with blood and desperation. What had she done? What had she bound herself and her daughter to? But there was no going back. The hunters knew they existed now. Even if she ran, even if she abandoned Damien, they'd hunt her down to eliminate witnesses. Her only chance, Iris's only chance, lay with the vampire sleeping beside her. As the light began to change, shifting from bright to golden, Eleanor felt the first stirring through the bond. Not consciousness yet, but potential. Like watching embers begin to glow before they caught fire. Sunset was coming. Iris felt it too. Mama, something's different. He's waking up. Should we be scared? Eleanor remembered Silver Eyes in the darkness, a voice rough with pain and bitter humor. She remembered him carrying Iris through the forest. Remembered his horror when he'd realized what the blood bond would cost her. She remembered his grief for the children murdered in their sleep. No, she said firmly. We shouldn't be scared, but she kept her hand on the knife she'd tucked into her belt that morning just in case. The last ray of sunlight faded from the cracks above, and in the darkness of the cellar, Damien's eyes opened, silver and burning and utterly inhuman. Chapter 7. The awakening. Damien's consciousness returned like a tide rushing back to shore, sudden, overwhelming, violent. His senses exploded to life. He could hear Eleanor's heartbeat, rapid and nervous. Could smell her fear, sharp and metallic beneath the earthen scent of the cellar. Could taste the lingering trace of his own blood in her veins, their bond humming like a plucked string. And he was hungry. Not the gentle hunger of earlier. This was primal, visceral, the hunger that came after day sleep, when his body demanded replenishment for the energy spent healing. Every instinct screamed at him to feed, to take, to drink until the gnawing emptiness in his core was satisfied. Eleanor sat 3 feet away, warm and alive and bleeding. He could smell the small cuts on her fingers from prying at the boards, could hear the rush of blood through her veins, calling to him like a siren song. Damien? Her voice cut through the haze, uncertain, wary. He forced himself to stillness, to control, forced the vampire down beneath layers of civilization and will. When he spoke, his voice came out rougher than intended. Don't move. She froze. I need a moment. He pressed his palms flat against the stone floor, grounding himself. The hunger clawed at him, but he'd survived 3 centuries by mastering it. He could survive this. I told you I'd be different. You're scaring Iris. That cut through the bloodlust like a knife. Damien turned his head slowly, found the child pressed against her mother's side, eyes wide in the darkness. To her, he probably looked like every nightmare story about vampires made flesh, eyes glowing silver, movements to fluid, something fundamentally wrong radiating from him. He looked away. I apologize. The day sleep. It strips away everything but hunger and instinct. Give me a few minutes to remember I'm more than a predator. Eleanor's heartbeat slowed slightly. What do you need? Distance. And blood. But not yours. Not while I'm like this. We don't have, I know. Damien closed his eyes, focusing inward. The healing had progressed during his sleep. The wound across his chest was now just raised scar tissue, still tender but no longer life-threatening. He'd survive without feeding tonight, barely. Tell me what happened while I slept, he said, grasping for distraction from the hunger. Did they come back? Eleanor's voice steadied as she shifted into practicality. Twice. At midday. They nearly opened the cellar. We were seconds from discovery when someone found tracks leading toward the old mill. Damien's eyes snapped open. Tracks? Whose? I don't know. Maybe animals. Maybe travelers. But the hunters followed them. They'll realize their mistake soon enough. We need to move. He tested his strength, rising to his feet with more ease than he'd managed at dawn. The day's sleep had restored him somewhat, though he remained far from full power. How long until full dark? It's been dark for perhaps 20 minutes. Good. Enough time for his body to fully wake, for the worst of the hunger to settle into something manageable. Damien moved to the cellar entrance, listening. The forest above was quiet. Too quiet. Something's wrong, he murmured. What do you mean? No birds. No small animals moving through the underbrush. Everything's gone silent. He tested the boards covering the entrance, finding them loose from where the hunters had disturbed them earlier. They're out there, waiting. Eleanor stood, pulling Iris up with her. How many? Damien extended his senses, sorting through sounds and scents carried on the night wind. 3. No, 4. Positioned in a perimeter about 50 yards out. They know we're here. Then how do we fight? You can barely stand. I'm stronger than I was. He turned to face her, letting her see the truth in his eyes. But you're right, I can't take 4 Volkov hunters in my current state. Not and protect you both. Iris spoke for the first time since he'd woken, her small voice surprisingly steady. What if we split up? Both adults looked at her. They're hunting him, Iris continued, meeting Damien's silver gaze without flinching. If Mama and I run one direction and you go another, they'll have to choose who to follow. No, Eleanor said immediately. Absolutely not. But Damien studied the child with new appreciation. She's right. They want me, not you. If I draw them away, and then what? Eleanor interrupted. You fight them alone and probably die? That's not a plan. That's suicide. Better. Then all 3 of us dying together. You promise me, Anne. Alliance. Partners. That doesn't work. If you throw yourself at the enemy the first chance you get. Damien felt a smile tug at his lips, despite the circumstances. What do you suggest then? Eleanor was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, you said you need blood. Fresh blood. Yes, but take mine. Enough to restore your strength. Eleanor, I can't control you controlled it earlier. You took exactly what you needed and stopped. Do it again. That was before day sleep. Now I'm half feral, and the hunger is 10 times worse. If I start feeding in this state, I might not be able to stop. Then I'll make you stop. She stepped closer, her fear evident, but her resolve unshaken. Iris, go to the far corner. Don't watch. Mama, do as I say, sweetheart. Now, the child obeyed reluctantly, turning her back to them. Eleanor faced Damien fully, tilting her head to expose her throat in a gesture that was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Take what you need, she said quietly. But if you kill me, you lose your alliance and your only chance of getting Iris to safety. So I suggest you maintain control. Damien stared at her, torn between hunger and horror at what she was offering. You're insane. Probably. Are you going to drink or argue? He should argue. Should refuse? Absolutely. Should push her away and face the hunters alone rather than risk her life. But the hunger gnawed at him, and the practical part of his mind, the part that had survived 3 centuries, knew she was right. Without blood, he couldn't protect any of them. With it, he had a chance. If I hurt you, you won't. Such certainty in her voice. Such absolute trust that he didn't deserve. Damien stepped closer slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. She didn't move, didn't retreat. Jess stood there with her throat bared and her heart racing and her complete faith that he would choose control over hunger. He placed one hand on her shoulder gently, carefully. The other cupped the back of her head, fingers threading through her hair. "Look at me," he whispered. She met his eyes, and in them he saw no fear, just determination. "If it's too much," he said, "if you feel faint or cold, tell me. I'll stop. I know you will." He bent his head to her throat, felt her pulse flutter against his lips. The scent of her blood overwhelmed him, warm, rich, carrying traces of fear and exhaustion and something else. Something that tasted of courage. His fangs extended, sharp and ready. "Eleanor," he breathed against her skin. "Thank you." Then he bit down. The first rush of blood hit his system like lightning. Power flooded through him, chasing away the weakness, the hunger, the lingering damage from silver poisoning. He felt his strength returning in waves, felt his senses sharpened to crystal clarity, and he felt her. The bond flared bright and fierce between them. And suddenly he wasn't just taking her blood, he was experiencing her emotions, her thoughts, the core of who she was. He felt her fear, yes, but beneath it lay steel, determination, a mother's fierce protectiveness. And underneath it all, carefully hidden, a thread of attraction that she'd refused to acknowledge even to herself. She felt drawn to him, to the danger he represented, to the power, to the loneliness that matched her own. The realization nearly broke his control. He forced himself to pull back, to take only what he needed. 3 swallows, 4, 5. Then, with every instinct screaming at him to continue, he withdrew. Eleanor swayed, and he caught her, steadying her against his chest. "That's enough," she whispered. "Yes." His voice was thick. "Are you all right?" Dizzy, but alive. He helped her sit, then turned away to master himself. The hunger had quieted to a manageable whisper. The wound on his chest had closed completely, leaving only faint scars. He felt strong again, not at full power, but close enough to fight, close enough to win. "Mama?" Iris's voice, small and frightened. "I'm fine, love." Eleanor's voice was weak but steady. "Just tired." Damien faced them both, feeling more in control than he had since waking. "Thank you, both of you." He moved to the cellar entrance, testing the boards. "Now we move. There's a ravine about half a mile north too steep for the hunters to cover effectively. We can lose them there. And then we find allies. I know a place, an old safe house from before the houses went to war. If it's still standing, we can shelter there while I make contact with the few vampires who might still honor the old laws." Eleanor stood shakily. "What old laws?" "The ones that say murdering an entire house, including children, is grounds for execution, even if you're backed by Volkov." Damien's voice went cold, hard. "Matthias broke every sacred law we have. That gives me leverage, if I can reach the right ears." He removed the boards from the entrance, letting in cold night air. Above, the forest waited dark and dangerous and full of enemies, but Damien felt alive in a way he hadn't since the betrayal. Fed, focused, and with something he'd lost when Matthias's blade struck home. "Purpose. Stay close," he said, offering Eleanor his hand. "And when I say run, you run. Understand?" She took his hand, her smaller fingers wrapping around his. "We're partners, remember? Where you go, we go. Stubborn woman, you're welcome." Chapter 8. Flight through shadows. They moved through the forest like ghosts, Damien leading, Eleanor and Iris following in his wake. He navigated by moonlight and memory, avoiding open spaces, keeping to the deepest shadows where even vampire eyes would struggle to track them. Behind them, the hunters would already know they'd fled. The question was how quickly they'd respond. Damien paused at the edge of a clearing, raising one hand to halt Eleanor. He listened, sorting through the sounds of the night. Wind in bare branches, a fox moving through distant underbrush, and their faint but distinct the sound of boots on frozen ground. "They're following," he whispered. "2 from the east, closing fast." Eleanor's hand tightened on Iris's. "The other 2? Circling ahead, trying to cut us off." He scanned the clearing, calculating angles and distances. "We'll have to fight through them, or avoid them entirely." Eleanor pointed to the left, where the land dropped away sharply. "That ravine you mentioned, is it that way?" Damien followed her gesture, his enhanced vision picking out details in the darkness. "Yes." The land fell away perhaps a quarter-mile north, forming a steep-sided gorge that the river had carved over centuries. Difficult terrain, but navigable if one was careful, and nearly impossible to search effectively in darkness. "Good eye," he said. but we'll have to move fast. Once they realize where we're headed, a whistle cut through the night. Sharp, deliberate. A signal. They know, Damien said flatly. Run, now. They ran. Eleanor pulled Iris along, half carrying her daughter when the snow grew too deep. Damien stayed just ahead, clearing a path, breaking through drifts with inhuman strength. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The hunters weren't bothering with stealth anymore. Corvin. A voice called out, male and mocking. You're only delaying the inevitable. Matthias wants you dead, and Volkov always honors its contracts. Damien didn't respond, saving his breath. The ravine was close now. He could hear the river rushing below. Swollen with snowmelt, they burst through a line of trees and nearly fell over the edge. The gorge dropped away in a sheer wall of rock and ice, 40 feet down to where dark water churned over stones. On the far side, the land rose again, heavily forested and perfect for losing pursuers, if they could cross. There, Eleanor pointed to their left, where a fallen tree spanned the ravine. Ancient, massive, its trunk easily 4 feet wide. In summer it might have been a reasonable bridge. Now, covered in ice and snow, it looked like a death trap. Can you cross? Damien asked. Eleanor's face was pale but determined. I can try. Mama, I'm scared, Iris whispered. I know, sweetheart. But we have to be brave just a little longer. Eleanor knelt before her daughter. Can you be brave for me? Iris nodded, though tears shone in her eyes. The hunters were getting closer. Damien could hear at least 3 now, converging on their position. Maybe 30 seconds until they broke through the tree line. I'll go first, he said. Test the ice. If it holds, Eleanor, you bring Iris across. Stay low. Move slowly. Don't look down. And if the hunters reach us before we're across, I'll delay them. You mean fight them alone, if necessary. He met her eyes. This is the part where you trust me, Eleanor? She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Don't die. I'll do my best. Damien stepped onto the log. Ice cracked under his weight but held. He moved quickly but carefully, testing each step. The log was solid beneath the ice good. He reached the midpoint just as the first hunter emerged from the trees behind them. The vampire was young, maybe a century old, dressed in dark leather that marked him as Volkov. His eyes found Damien on the log, and a vicious smile spread across his face. Got you, he said, pulling a crossbow from his back. Eleanor, move. Damien shouted. She didn't hesitate. She lifted Iris onto the log and climbed up after her, wrapping one arm around her daughter while using the other for balance. The hunter raised his crossbow. Silver-tipped bolt, Damien saw. Not fatal unless it hit the heart, but enough to send him tumbling into the ravine. He couldn't dodge. The log was too narrow, too slick. If he moved wrong, he'd fall. So he did the only thing he could. He charged forward, racing across the ice-covered log toward the far side. While the hunter tracked him with the crossbow, the bolt flew. Damien twisted, felt it graze his shoulder rather than puncture his chest. Pain flared, silver burning through fabric and flesh, but he kept moving. 3 more steps and he reached the far side, leaping off the log onto solid ground. Behind him, Eleanor and Iris were halfway across. 2 more hunters emerged from the trees, flanking the first. One moved toward the log, clearly intending to cross and cut them off. The other, older, more dangerous looking, simply stood watching with cold amusement. Careful, Marcus, the older one said. Remember what happened to the last 3 hunters who underestimated Corvin. Marcus hesitated at the edge of the log, eyeing Damien across the ravine. I'm weakened, Damien called out, letting exhaustion color his voice, making himself seem more vulnerable than he was. Silver poisoning. You could take me easily. The hunter's eyes gleamed. Young, arrogant, eager to prove himself. Exactly what Damien had hoped for. Marcus stepped onto the log. Damien waited until he was committed 4 steps out, too far to retreat quickly, then moved. He grabbed a thick branch from the ground and threw it with inhuman strength, not at Marcus, but at the log itself, at the point where ice met wood. The impact shattered the ice. Marcus's feet slipped. He windmilled, trying to catch his balance, and for a moment it seemed he might recover. Then Damien threw another branch, and another, each impact sending cracked spider webbing across the frozen surface. Marcus fell. His scream echoed off the ravine walls, cut short when he hit the water below. The current took him immediately, dragging him downstream into darkness. The older hunter watched his companion disappear without expression. Clever, but ultimately pointless. There are other ways across, Corvin. And we have all night. Eleanor and Iris reached Damien's side, both shaking from cold and fear. He pulled them away from the edge, deeper into the trees. How many more? Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite her trembling. At least 3. Maybe more by now. They'll have called for reinforcements. Damien's mind raced, calculating options. The safe house was still miles away, and Eleanor was exhausted. Iris couldn't run much farther, and his own strength, despite the blood Eleanor had given him, wouldn't last forever. They needed another advantage. The river, he said suddenly. It runs through Corvin territory, or what used to be Corvin territory. There are wards along the banks, old protections my mother set generations ago. If they're still active, what do? Prevent Volk of vampires from crossing. The houses have been enemies for centuries. Mother made sure our lands were protected from their kind. Eleanor's eyes widened with understanding. So if we stay near the river, they can't follow. Not easily. Damien started moving again, angling toward the sound of rushing water. It's not perfect. The wards fade over time, and I don't know how well they've held since the house fell. But it's a chance. They hurried downstream, following the ravine's edge. Behind them, Damien could hear the hunters regrouping, searching for crossing points. They had minutes at best. The land began to level out, the ravine walls growing less steep. And there, carved into a stone outcropping, Damien saw it the mark of House Corvin. A raven with spread wings, etched deep and filled with silver that still gleamed faintly in the moonlight. There, he said, pointing. That marks the boundary. If the wards hold, an arrow whistled past his ear, so close he felt the wind of its passage. The older hunter stood on a rock across the ravine, a bow in his hands and murder in his eyes. Run all you like, Corvin, but you can't hide forever. And when we catch you, and we will catch you, I'll make sure your death takes days. Damien met his gaze across the distance. Tell Matthias that House Corvin isn't dead yet. Tell him I'm coming for him. And tell him that when I do, he'll beg for the mercy of silver. Then he grabbed Eleanor's hand and ran, pulling her and Iris into Corvin territory. The moment they crossed the boundary, Damien felt it, a subtle shift in the air, like stepping through a doorway. The wards recognized him, welcomed him. His own land, his own protections still holding after all this time. Behind them, the hunter stepped to the ravine's edge as if to follow. The wards flared. Silver light erupted from the boundary stone, forming a barrier invisible to human eyes, but blazing bright to vampire senses. The hunter jerked back with a curse, his hand smoking where he'd tried to cross. That won't hold us long, he shouted. We'll find a way through. Maybe, but not tonight. Damien led Eleanor and Iris deeper into the forest, into lands that had been his family's for 300 years. Lands that still remembered him, still offered what protection they could. How far to your safe house? Eleanor asked, breathless. 2 miles. Maybe 3. Can you make it? She looked down at Iris, barely staying upright. Looked back at him with eyes that held no quit despite exhaustion. We'll make it, she said. Together. And somehow Damien believed her. Chapter 9. The safe house. Its safe house appeared out of the forest like a ghost from another age. It was smaller than Eleanor had imagined, a stone cottage built into the side of a hill, half buried by earth and time. Vines covered the walls, and snow had drifted against the door, but the structure looked solid, ancient but intact. Here, Damien said, brushing snow from a symbol carved beside the entrance. Another raven, this one clutching a silver key in its talons. Mother built this place centuries ago, a refuge in case the house ever fell under siege. She was prepared for this? Eleanor asked, shifting Iris's weight in her arms. Her daughter had fallen asleep halfway through the journey, exhausted beyond endurance. Mother was prepared for everything. Damien's voice held old grief. She survived the last great house war. She knew that power made you a target, and safety was an illusion. He pressed his palm against the raven symbol. For a moment, nothing happened. Then silver light traced the edges of the carving, spreading across the door in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The door swung inward with a groan of ancient hinges. Darkness waited beyond. Damien entered first, moving with the confident stride of someone who knew this place in his bones. Eleanor followed more cautiously, blinking as her eyes adjusted. The interior was a single large room, furnished with Spartan simplicity. A hearth dominated one wall, cold now, but stacked with wood, as though someone had just stepped out. A table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with preserved supplies in sealed jars. And in the back corner, a bed frame with a straw mattress that looked surprisingly well preserved. How is this still intact? Eleanor asked, setting Iris gently on the bed. If it's been abandoned, preservation spells. Damien moved to the hearth, kneeling to examine the wood. Mother wove them into the stones themselves. Time moves differently here, slowly. Things don't decay the way they should. He struck flint to tinder, and within minutes a fire crackled to life. Warmth began to seep into the room, and Eleanor felt something inside her unclench for the first time in days. They were safe. For now. Damien stood, surveying the room with an expression Eleanor couldn't read. I haven't been here since I was 50 years old. Mother brought me to show me all the house's secrets, all the bolt holes and safe routes. She said a good leader always had an escape plan. She sounds formidable. She was. He moved to the shelves, examining their contents. Dried meat, preserved fruit, grain. Enough to keep you and Iris fed for weeks. There's a stream outside, I'll fetch water. Damien, wait. Eleanor crossed to him, studying his face in the firelight. The wound on his shoulder from the hunter's bolt had already healed, but exhaustion showed in the tension around his eyes. When did you last rest? Really? Rest? I slept all day. Day sleep doesn't count. You're still recovering from silver poisoning. You've been fighting and running, and she gestured at the room. You're allowed to stop moving for 5 minutes. He stared at her, and something in his expression softened. You're worried about me. We're partners, remember? I'm allowed to worry. A faint smile touched his lips. So you are. He sat at the table, the movement deliberate, as though proving he could follow her advice. 5 minutes. Then I fetch water. Eleanor joined him, grateful to sit on something other than cold ground. The fire cast dancing shadows across the stone walls, and outside, wind howled through the trees. But here, in this ancient refuge, they were warm and hidden and alive. Tell me about the night court, Eleanor said. You mentioned it before. What is it exactly? Damien leaned back in his chair, his silver eyes reflecting firelight. The governing body of vampire society. 5 great houses: Corvin, Volkov, Nightshade, Thornwood, and Blackwater, each sending representatives to mediate disputes, enforce laws, maintain order. It's supposed to prevent exactly what Matthias did. Full-scale slaughter between houses. But if Volkov is helping him, then the court is compromised. At least partially. His jaw tightened. Volkov has wanted Corvin's territories for generations. We control major trade routes, have influence in a dozen mortal kingdoms. If Matthias promised them a share in exchange for support, they'd help him commit murder. Exactly. And the other 3 houses would turn a blind eye rather than risk starting a war. Damien's fingers drummed against the table. Unless I can prove what happened. Show the court that Matthias broke sacred law. Then they'd have to act. How do you prove it? Witnesses. Physical evidence. Testimony from someone whose word carries weight. He paused. My mother kept records. Detailed accounts of house business, alliances, debts. If I could reach the main estate, access her archives, Eleanor saw where this was leading. The estate where Matthias is currently sitting on your throne. Yes, that's suicide. Probably. He met her eyes. But it's the only way to expose him. The only way to bring him to justice and reclaim what he stole. Eleanor thought about that. About walking into enemy territory, facing a vampire who'd slaughtered children in their sleep. About the impossibility of success and the certainty of death if they failed. She thought about her cottage, destroyed. Her old life, shattered. Her daughter, sleeping on a bed in a vampire-safe house because there was nowhere else to go. We need a plan, she said finally. Not a suicide run, but an actual strategy. Information gathering, leverage, allies who owe you debts or hate Matthias enough to risk helping. Damien studied her with something like wonder. You're serious. You actually want to help me infiltrate my own estate and steal evidence from under my brother's nose. I want to survive. And survival means making sure Matthias can't hunt us for the rest of our lives. Eleanor's voice steadied with conviction. You said vampires follow laws. Fine, we use those laws. We build a case against him so strong the night court can't ignore it. That could take months. Then we have months. She glanced at Iris, still sleeping peacefully. Winter's here anyway. We'd have to shelter somewhere until spring. Might as well shelter here and plan. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're remarkable. You know that? Heat rose to Eleanor's cheeks. I'm practical. You're both. He stood, moving to the shelves. Here, eat. You'll need your strength if we're planning a campaign against my brother. He set bread and dried fruit on the table, still edible despite centuries, thanks to the preservation spells. Eleanor ate mechanically, her mind already working through possibilities. We'll need information, she said between bites, about Matthias's allies, his weaknesses, who in the night court might be sympathetic to your cause. I know a few vampires who honored the old ways. Whether they'd help. He trailed off. Many of them feared my mother more than they respected her. They might not extend that courtesy to me. Then we find other leverage, such as? Eleanor thought about it. About what she'd learned of vampire society in the past days, the blood laws, the emphasis on debt and honor, the complex web of alliances and ancient grudges. You said I gave you blood freely. That creates a debt you can't ignore. Are there others who owe your house similar debts? Damien's eyes widened slightly. Yes, several. Vampires my mother sheltered during the last war, families who pledged fealty in exchange for protection. If those oaths still hold, they'd have to help you, or at least not actively work against you. It's not that simple. Oaths can be twisted, interpreted narrowly, and if Matthias has declared me dead, he might argue the debts transferred to him as the new lord, might argue, which means it's not certain. Eleanor leaned forward. We start there. Find those who owe debts to House Corvin, test their loyalty, build a network. And how do we do that without revealing where I am? Carefully, she smiled, though there was no humor in it. I can move in daylight, remember? I can go places you can't, ask questions, deliver messages. You're human. No one would listen to you. They would if I carried proof I spoke for you. A token, something that proves I have your trust. Damien considered this. Then, slowly, he reached for his left hand and twisted off a ring Eleanor hadn't noticed before. Heavy silver, set with a black stone carved into the shape of a raven. This was my mother's signet ring. Passed down through 14 generations of Corvin lords and ladies. He held it out to her. Anyone who sees this will know you speak with my authority. It's more dangerous than any weapon I could give you. Eleanor took the ring, feeling its weight. It was too large for her fingers, so she threaded it onto a cord and hung it around her neck, tucking it beneath her dress. Who do we contact first? She asked. There's a vampire in the village. Old, reclusive, but she owes my mother a life debt. She runs an apothecary, mortal customers during the day, vampire clientele at night. If anyone would help us gather information, it's her. Name? Katerina Volkov. Eleanor froze. Volkov? As in the same house that's hunting us. Yes, Damien's expression was grim. She was exiled 50 years ago for refusing to participate in house politics. My mother gave her shelter and protection. If her exile still stands, her loyalty might be to us rather than her birth house. And if it's not, then we'll know very quickly that we're betrayed. Eleanor absorbed this. Every step forward seemed to involve risking everything on thin hope and older debts. But what choice did they have? Tomorrow, she said. I'll go to the village tomorrow. Feel out this Katerina. See if she's friend or foe. It's dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. Chapter 10. The choice morning came cold and gray, filtering through the safe house's single window in weak shafts of light. Eleanor woke to find Damien standing motionless by the hearth, staring into the dying embers. He hadn't moved to his day sleep, hadn't even sat down, just stood there like a statue carved from marble, lost in thoughts she couldn't read. You didn't sleep, she said quietly, not wanting to wake Iris. I don't need as much rest as mortals. And I was thinking. He turned to face her, and in the pale morning light, he looked almost human, tired, worried, grieving. About what we're planning. About the danger I'm putting you in. Eleanor rose from the bed, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the chill. We've been through this. I chose to help you. You chose to save a dying stranger. That's different from choosing to wage war against my brother and House Volkov. He crossed to the table, sat heavily. Eleanor, if you go to the village today, if you contact Katerina wearing my mother's ring, there's no going back. You'll be marked as my ally. Matthias will hunt you specifically, not just as a witness, but as a threat. He's already hunting us, as incidental targets. This makes it personal. Damien's voice was steady, but his eyes held something desperate. I'm giving you one last chance to walk away. Take Iris. Take whatever supplies you need and go. I'll draw the hunters away. Give you time to disappear. Eleanor studied him in the growing light, saw the sincerity in his offer, the the genuine willingness to sacrifice himself, saw also the loneliness underneath the certainty that everyone he'd ever cared for ended up dead or lost. "No," she said simply. "Eleanor, you asked me yesterday what I wanted. I'll tell you now." She sat across from him, meeting his silver eyes with her own steady gaze. "I want my daughter to grow up safe. I want to stop running, stop hiding, stop being powerless. And I want the man who murdered children in their sleep to face justice." Noble goals. But you're human, mortal. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I pulled you from that river. Eleanor's voice strengthened. "You don't get to make choices for me, Damien. You don't get to decide I'm too fragile or too precious to risk. I'm a widow who survived poverty, grief, and 3 months of slow starvation. I'm stronger than you think. I know you're strong. That's not what I'm questioning." "Then what are you questioning?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, whether I have the right to let you risk everything for my vendetta. Whether wanting your help makes me selfish or practical, or just desperate enough to endanger anyone who shows me kindness." Eleanor reached across the table, placing her hand over his. His skin was cool, but not cold, not lifeless, just different. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "This isn't just your vendetta anymore. Matthias destroyed your house. He's trying to destroy you. If we let him succeed, what happens next? Does he stop? Does Volkov stop? Or do they keep taking, keep killing, until there's nothing left but tyrants ruling through fear? You think stopping them makes you heroic? I think stopping them makes me human. The kind of human who doesn't let evil go unchallenged just because the odds are bad." She squeezed his hand. "You don't have to protect me from myself, Damien. You just have to trust that I know what I'm choosing." He stared at their joined hands, and something in his expression cracked. "I've lost everyone I ever tried to protect. My mother, my house, the children who trusted me to keep them safe. If I lose you too, you won't lose me by letting me help. You'll lose me by pushing me away." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I know what it's like to feel responsible for everything. To think that if you just work hard enough, care enough, sacrifice enough, you can keep everyone safe. But sometimes bad things happen anyway. Sometimes people die despite your best efforts. That doesn't mean you stop trying." "You're talking about your husband." "I'm talking about both of us." She withdrew her hand, stood. "I'm going to the village today. I'm going to contact Katerina. I'm going to start building your network of allies. You can either help me prepare, or you can brood about it. Your choice." Damien looked up at her, and despite the severity of the moment, a faint smile touched his lips. "Has anyone ever told you you're terrifying when you're determined? My husband used to say I was stubborn as a mule. He wasn't wrong." Damien stood, moved to the shelves. "All right, if you're set on this course, let me at least arm you with knowledge." He pulled down a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "This is my mother's record of debts owed to House Corvin. Names, dates, exact terms of each oath. Study it. Know who you're dealing with." Eleanor took the journal reverently. "And Katerina? She's listed near the back. The oath was sworn in 1773, witnessed by 3 Night Court members. My mother saved her from execution after Katerina refused to participate in a blood hunt, a sport among young Volkov vampires where they chase humans for entertainment." His voice went cold. "Katerina thought it barbaric. Her house disagreed. My mother intervened. So she owes you everything, in theory. In practice." Damien hesitated. 50 years is a long time for a vampire to nurse a grudge against her own family. She may have reconciled with House Volkov, or she may still hate them. We won't know until you meet her." Eleanor opened the journal, scanning the careful handwriting within. Lists of names, promises given and received, the intricate web of debt and honor that bound vampire society together. It was like reading a ledger of souls. How do I approach her? Go to her shop. Ask for Wolfsbane tincture, that's a code. It tells her you're there on vampire business, not mortal. When she asks who sent you, show her the ring. That should be enough. And if she attacks me, she won't. Not in her own shop. Not in daylight. It would violate too many laws." He paused. "But take this anyway." He handed her a small vial filled with clear liquid, silver water, blessed by a priest and infused with dissolved silver. If a vampire attacks you, throw this in their face. It won't kill them, but it'll hurt enough to let you escape. Eleanor tucked the vial into her pocket beside the ring. "What else do I need to know? Keep your answers brief. Don't volunteer information. Vampires respect those who give nothing away freely." Damien moved to the window, checking the angle of the light. And Eleanor, if anything feels wrong, if your instincts scream danger, run. Don't be polite. Don't finish the conversation. Just run. I will. She glanced at Iris, still sleeping peacefully. Will she be safe here? Safer than anywhere else. The wards on this place are strong, and I'll be here. His expression softened. I may be unconscious during day sleep, but the wards will alert me if anyone breaches the perimeter. I'll protect her with my life. I know you will. Eleanor prepared, quickly washing her face in water Damien had fetched the night before, braiding her hair, putting on her least-worn dress. She looked like what she was, a poor widow going to market. Perfect camouflage. Iris woke as Eleanor was preparing to leave. Mama, where are you going? Eleanor knelt beside the bed, brushing hair from her daughter's face. To the village. I need to buy supplies and talk to someone who might help us. Is it dangerous? Everything's a little dangerous now, sweetheart, but I'll be careful. She kissed Iris's forehead. You stay here with Damien. He'll keep you safe. Iris looked past her mother to where Damien stood by the door. He's scary sometimes. I know, but he's on our side. That's what matters. Will you come back? The question struck Eleanor's heart. Always? I'll always come back to you. She stood, turned to Damien. He handed her a worn cloak, another artifact from the safe house's preserved supplies. The village is 2 miles south, he said. Follow the stream. Stay off the main road. Katerina's shop is on the east side of the market square. A green door with no sign. No sign? Those who need to find her, find her. Everyone else passes by without noticing. He paused. Be back before sunset. If you're not here when I wake, I'll come looking for you. I'll be here. She started toward the door, but his hand on her arm stopped her. When she turned, he was closer than she'd expected, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker silver in his eyes. Eleanor, thank you for choosing to stay, for choosing to fight. His voice dropped lower. For choosing me. Her breath caught. In the pale morning light, with vulnerability written across his ancient features, he looked less like a monster, and more like a man who'd lost everything and found unexpected hope in the last place he'd thought to look. We're partners, she said softly. That means we choose each other. Every day. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or the acknowledgement of something deeper that neither was ready to name. Then Damien stepped back, releasing her arm. Go, and be careful. Eleanor pulled the cloak around her shoulders and stepped out into the cold morning. Behind her, she heard Iris asking Damien about breakfast, heard his deep voice responding with surprising gentleness. She followed the stream south, her boots crunching through fresh snow. The forest was quiet, peaceful. Hard to believe that hunters had chased them through these same woods just hours before. The village appeared gradually, first smoke from chimneys, then the sound of morning activity, then buildings clustering together against the cold. Eleanor pulled her hood up, became just another widow going about her business. The market square was modest, a dozen shops and stalls arranged around a central well. Eleanor spotted the green door immediately, though something about it made her eyes want to slide away. Vampire magic, she realized. A ward to discourage casual notice. She pushed it open. The shop interior was dim, fragrant with dried herbs and stranger scents Eleanor couldn't identify. Shelves lined every wall, packed with bottles, jars, bundles of plants. And behind a worn counter stood a woman. She was beautiful in the unsettling way of all vampires, ageless, perfect, and human. Her hair was white blonde, her eyes pale blue, her skin like porcelain. She wore simple clothes, but moved with predatory grace. We're closed, she said, without looking up from the mortar and pestle in her hands. I need wolfsbane tincture, Eleanor said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. The vampire's hands stilled. Her head rose slowly, those pale eyes fixing on Eleanor with sudden intensity. Do you know? And who told you to ask for that? Eleanor reached for the ring hanging beneath her dress, drew it out into the light. The vampire's eyes widened. She set down the mortar carefully, came around the counter with movements too fluid to be human. Stopped 3 feet from Eleanor, staring at the signet ring. That's House Corvin, she whispered. That's the lady's own ring. Where did you get it? From her son. Her son is dead. Matthias killed him weeks ago. Matthias tried. He failed. Eleanor met the vampire's gaze without flinching. Lord Damien Corvin lives, and he's calling in his mother's debts. Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Then Katerina threw back her head and laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and slightly unhinged. Oh, this is delicious. Matthias thinks he's won, thinks he's secured his throne, and all the while, his brother is alive and plotting. She circled Eleanor like a predator, studying her from every angle. And he sent a human to contact me. Bold, stupid perhaps, but bold. Will you help us? Katerina stopped circling, stood directly before Eleanor. What exactly is Lord Corvin asking for? Information, allies, a way to expose what Matthias did to the Night Court, and in exchange, the debt your house holds would be cleared. You'd owe nothing to Corvin or Volkov. The vampire's smile was cold and beautiful. My dear child, that debt was paid in blood and suffering 50 years ago. I owe House Corvin nothing. Eleanor's heart sank. But before she could respond, Katerina continued, however, I owe Matthias Corvin quite a lot. He's been spreading rumors about me, trying to force me back into Volkov politics, trying to use my exile as leverage. Her eyes gleamed. So while I don't owe Lord Damien anything, I'm very interested in seeing his brother destroyed. Tell me everything. And despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, Eleanor felt hope kindle in her chest.